Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to be here with all of you distance learners from the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication at Odisha State Open University, Sambalpur. Today we're going to put on our investigative journalist hats and uncover the sheer power of rebellious filmmaking. We're stepping way outside the traditional multiplex and diving headfirst into the world of alternative cinema. This is an absolutely crucial exploration for anyone serious about understanding how media shapes, challenges, and reflects the society we live in.
So, let's kick things off with a really big question. We need to critically look at the media we consume every single day and ask ourselves, what actually happens when the camera stops being just a tool for entertainment and starts becoming a weapon for truth and defiance? Think about it. When you sit down to watch a movie, are you just looking to check out and escape reality for a couple of hours? Or are you looking for a mirror that reflects the raw and honestly, sometimes uncomfortable truths of our world? Because when cinema stops prioritizing pure entertainment and starts rebelling against the status quo, it transforms from a passive viewing experience into a massive catalyst for social change.
Here's our roadmap for this explainer, serving as your syllabus for today's deep dive. We'll start by moving beyond the mainstream. Then, we'll decode alternative cinema, explore the incredible power of nonfiction, look at some amazing Indian documentary trailblazers, dive into feminist film and representation, and finally, wrap it all up with a summary of our key takeaways.
All right, let's jump right into part one, Beyond the Mainstream.
You know, when you think about typical mainstream cinema, it usually hands you this very neat, linear story. A clear beginning, middle, and end, perfectly packaged to guarantee box office sales and maximize your entertainment. But alternative cinema, it literally throws that entire rule book out the window. It totally embraces fragmented, non-linear, and open-ended storytelling. It genuinely dares to experiment with visual styles and tackles socially relevant issues head-on, constantly challenging traditional norms.
Which brings us to our second section, Decoding Alternative Cinema.
So, what exactly is it? Well, alternative cinema isn't just a quirky artistic choice. It's a highly deliberate departure from the commercial norm. It exists to give a massive platform to marginalized voices, especially folks from the global south. It actively sheds light on the lived experiences of communities that are so frequently ignored or totally misrepresented in dominant commercial narratives. Instead of just focusing on profit, it focuses on portraying stories that reflect real struggles, traditions, and aspirations. It bridges that crucial gap between art and activism.
And what's really fascinating here is how having a low budget actually forces some raw, incredible innovation. Without giant studio backing, independent directors often use natural locations and non-professional actors, which just skyrockets the realism. They have the absolute artistic freedom to dive into heavy, socially relevant themes like poverty, gender inequality, and political oppression. They play around with experimental cinematography, think shaky handheld cameras, jarring jump cuts, and totally natural lighting to create a super authentic aesthetic. They want absolute realism, stripping away that exaggerated Hollywood melodrama to show relatable, nuanced human emotion.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Section 3, The Power of Nonfiction.
Moving away from fictional rebellion, let's talk about filmmakers who are capturing absolute, unvarnished reality. Nonfiction cinema is deeply, fundamentally rooted in facts. Now, while it's true that a filmmaker's perspective in the editing room can certainly shape a narrative, the main goal here is always to document reality. These films educate, they inform, and they serve as vital visual records of human history. Everything from early 20th century newsreels right up to modern biographical films and sweeping nature docs. They really build a foundation for advocacy.
Now, think about this. Whether a filmmaker just passively observes life or actively jumps into the story, the specific subgenre they use totally changes how we, the viewers, digest the truth. In observational documentaries like Grey Gardens, the camera is literally a fly on the wall with almost zero interference. But in participatory documentaries like Super Size Me, the filmmaker actively engages with the subject, becoming a huge part of the narrative itself. And then you have expository documentaries like An Inconvenient Truth, where a clear narrative voice guides you through hard scientific evidence. They are all different tools, but all used to build incredibly compelling factual arguments.
Let's ground this theory in some real history. Section 4, Indian Documentary Trailblazers. As distance learners in India, this is especially relevant to us. We can clearly see how incredible directors have used their cameras as literal instruments of activism, tackling everything from political repression to ecological balance. Just look at this timeline of phenomenal documentation. You have S. Sukhdev's India 67, capturing the socio-economic realities of a newly independent nation.
Then Anand Bhattovardhan's Prisoners of Conscience, diving deep into political repression during the 1970s emergency. Rakesh Sharma's Final Solution provided crucial documentation around the 2002 Gujarat riots. And bringing it right up to the modern day, Kartiki Gonsalves's Academy Award-winning The Elephant Whisperers gave the whole world a breathtaking look at indigenous conservation efforts. These films neutrally and powerfully present the facts, acting as a direct mirror to our society.
Now, I want you to ask yourself, can you think of an example from your own daily life where a streaming service brought a really powerful grassroots story right to your screen? Because digital platforms have completely changed the game. Independent nonfiction films now have a wider audience than ever before in history. A perfect example is the Oscar-nominated documentary Writing with Fire, which follows a women-led grassroots media organization that is completely challenging the status quo in journalism. Streaming services are breaking down international borders, making these vital, untold stories accessible across the globe. So, we've seen how nonfiction documents truth. Now let's explore how feminist film deconstructs ideology.
Moving on to our next group of cinematic rebels. Section 5. Feminist Film and Representation.
We absolutely have to talk about the male gaze. Coined by Laura Mulvey back in 1975, this concept critiques how mainstream films have historically positioned women merely as passive objects of visual pleasure, designed pretty much exclusively for heterosexual male viewers. The crucial point here is that feminist film actively shatters this traditional gaze. It transforms women from being mere spectacles on a screen into complex, fiercely independent agents. These filmmakers completely subvert the norm by adopting a female-centric perspective, prioritizing women's inner thoughts, autonomy, and lived experiences over simple visual objectification.
For decades, traditional movies just boxed women into these incredibly rigid, limiting archetypes, right? The helpless damsel in distress, the seductive femme fatale, or the completely self-sacrificing mother. Feminist cinema totally deconstructs that whole shebang. It gives us characters who are beautifully complex, flawed, multidimensional, and entirely in charge of their own destinies. It emphasizes major themes of resistance and resilience. Just look at how films like Greta Gerwig's Little Women completely rewrite these rigid stereotypes to emphasize fierce female ambition and true individual agency.
And it is just amazing to see the sheer variety of intersectional voices and experimental techniques these directors are using to reclaim the narrative. Because feminist cinema heavily embraces intersectionality, fully acknowledging that race, class, and sexuality completely change a woman's experience. You look at Julie Dash's Daughters of the Dust or Annalilia Mirpour's A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. These incredible directors are using non-linear structures and highly intentional sound design to guarantee that women's voices take center stage. They are reclaiming female subjectivity and fundamentally reshaping how the film industry operates today.
All right, we've covered a ton of ground today. Let's head into our final section, summary and key takeaways.
But right before we do the final recap, I want to quickly touch on third cinema. Emerging in the 1960s across Latin America, Africa, and Asia, this movement perfectly encapsulates the ultimate goal of alternative filmmaking, utilizing art strictly as a tool for real social change. This political and cultural movement actively rejected commercial Hollywood-style cinema. It aimed to provide a massive platform for voices that had been entirely excluded from the mainstream, proving once and for all that film can be a direct instrument for political awareness.
Okay, let's distill all of this down into 5 crucial takeaways that you absolutely need for your media literacy toolkit. 1. Alternative cinema deliberately challenges traditional, linear, box office-driven storytelling. 2. Nonfiction cinema is deeply rooted in truth, utilizing all kinds of subgenres to advocate for change. 3. Indian nonfiction trailblazers have provided unparalleled historical records of the country's huge socio-political shifts. 4. Feminist filmmaking actively shatters rigid gender roles and the male gaze. And 5. Across all these incredible forms, cinema proves time and time again that it is a vital tool for cultural discourse and real-world transformation.
So, as future media professionals, here is my final provocative question for you. How will you use the lens of your own camera to challenge the status quo? I really hope this explainer motivates you to continue your studies with the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication, constantly questioning the narratives around you and preparing to tell the stories that truly matter. Whenever you consume media, analyze the source, question the perspective, and appreciate the immense power of the Rebel's lens. Until next time, keep questioning and keep exploring.